And what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It is your boy Cheap Ludes, and it is time to finish up this month's tier list. Finally, we're getting to the final position, the center position. Before we get started, man, please drop a like, comment down below what you think of the tier list, etc. And if you're new to the channel, man, subscribe. We're like super close to 1,000 subscribers, man. Help me out. I'm at 931 or something right now. Road to 1K, whatever, all that YouTube stuff, doesn't matter. So, anyways, right now we're tackling the center tier as far as our tier list series. If you haven't checked out the rest of them, they're all in my channel. I'll link at least 2 of them at the end of this video, so you can go check those out. But we're doing the center tier today, which is one of the hardest tiers, at least, to do a tier list on, period. Just because, honestly, a variety of things when it comes to like meta gameplay, etc. And honestly, Season 1, Season 2, like center position was one of the best positions in my team, and right now I think it's arguably the worst, just because 2K seemed to focus on, which rightly so, focus on forwards and shooting guards for pretty much the entirety of Season 2 and the beginning of Season 3. So, that being said, let's get into the itinerary here. S tier, unquestionably best cards at the position. That being said, they're basically 5-tool guys that do a little bit of everything, and I'll explain why they're there. A tier guys. They do almost everything, and the things that they do, they do really, really, really well, even sometimes better than S tier guys. B tier, very, very good cards, very usable. They do about 2 or 3 things really, really well. Obviously, you'd like to have the A tier and S tier guys a little bit more. C tier, specialist guys. They'll do 1 or 2 things very, very well, or even just well enough. And other than that, the guys above them are obviously better. D tier, guys I don't recommend everybody use, but if you're good with the cards, I see no reason why you can't use them. F tier, guys that I personally recommend going and getting any of the guys higher, especially if they're more expensive than like D tier guys and stuff like that. Before we get started, I mean, the biggest thing is like S, A, and B tier. All of these guys, just by adding them to your team, if you have guys that are C, D, or F tier, will make your team better in some way, shape, or form. That's kind of the biggest thing to remember. And it scales up, obviously. So, with that being said, let's get started. Alvin Adams. Alvin Adams is D tier. He's actually pretty decent. He has a really wet mid-range. He's a little bit small at 6'9". Actually, that's like really small. He plays better at the power forward position, but he can handle the ball a little bit. He rebounds decent. He's got a pretty decent mid-range. He's honestly not that bad, to be honest with you. Next up, we got Andre Drummond. Drummond's D tier as well. And I know what you're saying. You're like, dude, Drummond can't shoot. Why is he even in D tier at this point? Well, simply put, he's massive. He's one of the best pick and roll guys in the game. Definitely not the roll part, but he sets incredibly effective screens. He rebounds exceptionally well. He gets up and dunks the ball very well too. And the meta is to basically use like small, faster centers, and Andre Drummond can kind of counter them to a certain extent. He's an excellent rebounder as well. So he fits the tier of D tier. Like, obviously, I recommend using guys that are better than Andre Drummond, but if you really like Drummond, he does do enough things well enough that he's not worthless or not in F tier, if that makes sense. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I think he's D tier as well. He's very similar to Andre Drummond, but he moves pretty well. He's just a little bit outdated at this point. That's the only reason he's in D tier. Kareem's body type alone brings him up to C tier. Just because he's extremely lanky. I said lanky. He's very lanky. He's got very long arms. He can shoot a decent mid-range. I think he's better than Drummond and Alvin Adams. You'd like to see him shoot a little bit better, but he's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Obviously, that's not a real thing. He is a little bit outdated, which is why he's in C tier. Theo Ratliff. If you like Theo Ratliff, by all means, use him. I'm not going to judge you for that. I just think that, like, in the sphere of like what Theo Ratliff does, I just think there's much better options. Like, Drummond is a better option than Theo as far as what he does. They're similar in like speed. Drummond and him are about the same size too. Drummond's just a little bit bigger body type, so he can kind of handle people, especially on next gen. That's way more important. That's why I would put Theo down there. Ben Wallace. Yeah, Ben Wallace is D. I like Ben Wallace. I've always been a big Ben Wallace fan, but at the same time, he's a defensive first center that doesn't really bring anything else to the table. He can't really shoot. He can't really do much of anything. And that being said, he's just outdated. Like, there's nothing wrong with him, and he's small at 6'9". So there's just so many better options as far as like centers that you could use that do the same things as Ben Wallace and at the same time are the same height, etc. It's just he's one of the first diamonds that came out. He's just a little bit outdated. You know, there's nothing really wrong with him. He has Hall of Fame Intimidator, Hall of Fame Rebound Chaser. He's not incredibly terrible. He's got Defensive Leader. He has some finishing badges. It's just that he can't handle the ball. His speed is okay. I'm going to move him up to C tier. I mean, he's good enough. He operates really well. He handles well. He plays great defense. I can't sit here and say he's on the same level with Alvin Adams now that I'm thinking about it. Bill Laimbeer, he's C tier. So I'll say on current gen, he's D tier. On next gen, he's B tier. So C tier seems appropriate with it. He can shoot a little bit, but his shot is really gross. So you're going to have to use the shot stick, basically shot aiming, in order to use him effectively. But that being said, he does have like a dynamic duo with Allen Houston, which doesn't make any sense, but what are you going to do? Pretty solid card, man. Herb Williams, F. I would use someone like Drummond or some of the other guys that are in D tier over Herb Williams. I would even probably use Theo Ratliff over him personally. Larry Sanders. Larry Sanders is B tier. And you may be sitting here like, what? How is he B tier? In my opinion, Larry Sanders is, number one, he's fast, okay? That's key. Not a lot of centers are fast like Larry Sanders are. Like, he moves really well. Like, if you look at his actual speed stats, he only has like a 77 speed, but he's such a big body that he runs super, super fast. He can't really shoot, but he can dunk. He can drive. His speed with ball is up at 63, which is solid. His ball handle is terrible, but for whatever reason, Larry Sanders has really good dribble moves and seems to not lose the ball a lot. Sometimes they're just, with a game like 2K, sometimes just things don't work like they say they should. Like, when it comes to cards that you look at their 2K database entries and you're like, oh, okay, he has a 35 ball handle. Some of those guys may only have a 35 ball handle, but for whatever reason, their dribble animations make it almost impossible to get the ball stolen from him. Larry Sanders is one of those people. Plus, he is an insanely good card at blocking shots and protecting the middle. He grabs an absurd amount of rebounds, and he's one of the best defensive cards in the game. Yeah, he doesn't have his badges aren't as elite at like Ben Wallace, but he's also huge, and his badges aren't that far off, and they're almost identically similar. He also plays well in the post too, so that's pretty decent. This may be a personal preference thing. I'm sure people won't agree with me, and I may drop him down to C tier once we get more cards out, but he really is that good. Bill Russell is A tier. Bill Russell's one of the best defensive centers in this entire game. Everything I said about Larry Sanders applies to Bill Russell. I think Larry Sanders moves a little bit better than Bill Russell personally, but at the same time, he's got elite badges. Hall of Fame Defensive Leader, Hall of Fame Intimidator, and Rim Protector. Plus, he's got gold in pretty much every defensive badge. Plus, you can give him some good badges as well. His jump shot is not great, but at the same time, he at least has a 70 mid-range, so he can step out and hit the mid. Patrick Ewing. Ewing's really tough. I think he deserves to go A tier as well, and the reason for that is he's a really incredibly good defensive card. And if you manage to get him through the grind, I'm going to tell you that he's pretty decent. He can hit the mid at a very high clip, and he can actually step out and hit the three if you have the right coach, put a shoe on him, have a floor general out there. He can do all that. His jump shot's not great, but he doesn't handle the ball, but he plays significantly better defense than Larry Sanders. In addition, he scores better. I guess the defense isn't really that crazy different, especially between like Larry Sanders and Bill Russell and Patrick Ewing. They're all very good defensive cards, but Patrick Ewing just brings a offensive element to your team that those two guys don't. But I will be the first person to say I think Bill Russell is better defensively than Pat Ewing, so it's kind of a wash. Bill Walton. Bill Walton's D tier. He sometimes would be F tier, but at the same time, he's got a decent jump shot. And then he has this dynamic duo with Dennis Johnson that makes them both actually very good. So he's not useless by any means. He's not F tier. He's not great, but D tier seems to be appropriate for him. Next up, we got Bargnani. Bargnani's so good. Bargnani's B tier. He's so good. I like Bargnani a lot. He plays just enough defense that he's usable. At the same time, like, he shoots incredibly well, and he's a great spot-up shooter. And he rebounds the ball at a different clip. He's also got decent size, decent speed. He's just a really good card. B tier is about accurate for him, though. Bob Lanier. You know what? I'm gonna have to move my man Larry Sanders down. I like Larry Sanders a lot, but who am I kidding? Like, he's not Bob Lanier. Like, Bob Lanier is incredibly good. He even has the potential to move up to A tier. I just think we've gotten cards that kind of push him out of A tier a little bit. He doesn't have any hot zones, which is kind of a problem, and his badge count is a little bit low. You'd like to see him have a little bit more of those defensive badges just to play the center position, and he's a little bit small. He can't handle the ball, really. I mean, he's got 50, so it's not that big of a deal, but he's a really, really good card, and if you still use Bob Lanier, I would say he's like top tier, B tier, but I just think like Patrick Ewing and Bill Russell are better than him, so. Next B tier denizen would be Kristaps. I like Kristaps. He's just outdated. His badge count is very low. You can't add very many badges to him. He's a great card, though, and it has less to do with his card and the fact that Kristaps is 7'3" and like can run the floor a little bit. Next up, we got Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh is probably C tier. He moves really well, and he has a decent enough jump shot. He's just not going to help you at all defensively, and he's a little too small to play the center position. Next up, we got Daryl Dawkins. I'm not a huge fan of Daryl Dawkins. I kind of think he's terrible, but he's not useless. Like, he's not. He rebounds the ball really well. Offensively, he's decent. He can kind of handle the ball a little bit and throw down monster dunks. He can move a little bit too. Like, he's not like Theo Ratliff and Herb Williams, who are just basically like giant slabs of stone that sit in the middle of the paint and like grab rebounds occasionally and do nothing else. Like, there's a little bit more dimension to his game, so I think D tier is kind of appropriate for him. I'm not saying he's better than like Andre Drummond. I personally think he's better than Bill Walton, but depends. Mark Eaton. Mark Eaton's tough, man. Dude, to be honest with you, he just doesn't do enough to go up to C tier. Like, he's just a better version of like these guys. But like, even Drummond's better offensively, says Daryl Dawkins. Like, Mark Eaton's great defensively, but he's just so slow, man. He's huge, though. Dave Cowens is tough. I still think he's an S tier center, though I don't recommend locking in for him at this stage in the game. He's still a 5-tool guy. Like, he's a little small at 6'9", so that's kind of a little bit of a knock against his card, but at the same time, man, he can dribble, he can pass, he can shoot, he can throw down dunks, he plays defense, he can grab boards, he blocks shots. He does a little bit of everything, so it's hard to really keep him out of S tier. But I will say, like, the gap between him and Pat Ewing and Bill Russell is not as big as it once was. Just because, especially on Next Gen, the game's kind of changed a little bit. So Dave Cowan's kind of a meta card. And I just don't know 100%. I think he's still S tier, but barely. Like, he'll be out of S tier probably by next tier list, and not even particularly close. Vlade Divac, he's D tier. He's okay. He can shoot a little bit and stuff. That's about all I say. Robert Parrish is not good. I do not like Robert Parrish. He's just slow. He basically is like Herb Williams and Theo Ratliff. Like, that's basically the guy they are. Alonzo Mourning, yeah, he's C tier. He can shoot a little bit. Granted, his jump shot's slow, but he plays excellent defense and he moves really well. I don't think he's B tier, but he's definitely usable at C tier for sure. Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain's B tier. He's Wilt. You know, like, you get that Wilt body type and those Wilt animations. Like, he dominates the inside. He can move really well. He can even ball handle a little bit. He's basically like a souped up version of like what Andre Drummond or Daryl Dawkins does. He's just a way improved version of those two guys. I still think that allows him to leapfrog the C tier guys just because of how good he is on the defensive end as well. But he's not as good as like Bill Russell and Patrick Ewing. Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah moves well enough that it keeps him out of F tier. I'm a Bulls fan too, Stan, so I can't hate on Joakim too hard. He brings you next to nothing on the offensive end, except for putback dunks. But just how well he moves around the court, and he can kind of push the ball up with the ball in his hand a little bit, it makes him good enough to stay out of F tier. Same with my man Art Gilmore. He's not great, but he's just a little too one-dimensional to run up to C tier. But still, he's a pretty decent card. DeAndre Jordan deserves to be right here as well. All these guys are not terrible, but they only do a couple things. They're specialist guys. I recommend going with a different guy. But if you use like DeAndre Jordan or Drummond or like Art Gilmore, I totally understand why you use them. But just the things the cards do basically limits them to D tier. Arvydas Sabonis. I'm gonna chill on Arvidas for a little bit. Swen Nader, I would say he's C tier, and the reason for that is he does what all of these guys do, just a little bit better. Like, that's simply it. David Robinson is A tier. David Robinson is 100% A tier. He is a lights out center. He shoots the mid range really well. He's locked down defensively. He's one of the best rebounders in this game. I really don't think there's much I need to say about David Robinson. He is that good of a card. You'd like to see his badge count be a little higher, but at the same time, I mean, does it really matter? He's got 25 gold badges, 5 Hoffs. Those Hoff badges being like Rim Protector and Tireless Defender. Then he's got like Gold Intimidator, Bronze Clamps, which he's a center. You don't really need the your center to have higher than Bronze or Silver Clamps. Like, it helps, obviously, but it's not necessary, even in current gen. He's got good badges. He has good animations. David Robinson always does. You'd like to see his driving dunk be a little bit higher, but at the same time, he's here to play lockdown defense, and he's got a 77 shot 3, so he can shoot the 3 a little bit. He's definitely an A tier card for sure. I would still probably take Ewing and Russell. Well, Russell's kind of iffy. I'd probably take David Robinson over Russell. Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, it's Shaq. You have Shaq animations with the young Shaq speed, so he's definitely C tier. I don't think he's down in D tier. He's athletic enough to keep him out of D tier. Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler deserves to be probably right here in D tier as well. I like Tyson Chandler, but I can't honestly say he's better 100% than DeAndre Jordan or Andre Drummond or Dawkins or even Mark Eaton. Like, realistically. PJ Brown's probably C tier. He just plays really well, really good defense, and he moves really well. And he can shoot the mid-range a little bit, which just kind of keeps him out of D tier. Just having that extra element to his game is really important, in my opinion anyway. Some people really like this card, other people really hate this card. It just kind of depends. His badge count is low. He doesn't have any Hoff badges, but all the badges he has gold are decent, and he's got that 80 mid-range. Sam Perkins is the same way. Like, he's C tier. He brings you next to nothing defensively, but he shoots the ball really well, and he can move decent. He's a little bit small. He works better as a power forward, but still, like, a pretty decent card. Yao Ming deserves to go right next to Mark Eaton. Like, he's so incredibly slow, which is not like a huge deal. Like, if you set your offense up to operate, or your team in general, I should say, in a way that takes account of his speed, he's not terrible, and he has a good mid-range with Gold Catch and Shoot and Hot Zone Hunter, and Hot Zone's all over the mid-range area. But at the same time, he just lacks certain badges that make him more of a complete guy. You know what? I don't know. It's his speed, man. His speed is so ridiculously slow. But can I for certain say he's worse than Swen Nader? No, I'd probably put him in C tier. DeMarcus Cousins is C tier as well. He just doesn't bring much to your team, but he's okay, I suppose. Jokic is S tier. Jokic is the epitome of a 5-tool guy. He plays defense. He can play make. He facilitates. He can dribble. He can shoot. He can do pretty much anything you need him to do. Any way your team plays, you can slot Jokic into your lineup, and he can basically adopt that play style. So however you play 2K, Jokic can fit your team. That is the epitome of an S tier guy. Obviously, I put him ahead of Dave Cowens. He's, in my opinion, the best center in the entire game. And it's not particularly close. As far as true centers, like I still like to use like either an Anthony Davis or a Tim Duncan at the center position, but as far as primary position centers, Jokic is the absolute best. Nate Thurman. Nate Thurman's a great defensive card. I don't think he's truly that much different than Wilt Chamberlain as far as like what they bring to your team. So I mean, low end B tier is pretty much makes sense for him. Marcus Camby is a really good defensive card as well. He can shoot a little bit. He runs fast. I would say low end B tier. I wouldn't recommend locking in for him, but if you did, he's not a terrible card at all. You might as well use him. Brook Lopez is not great, but he does block shots and shoot a little bit, so C tier makes sense for him. Willis Reed gets C tier too, just because he moves really well. He's a little bit small, but he can shoot a tiny bit of the mid-range. He rebounds the ball better than a lot of the cards on this list that are taller just because of his speed and his leaping ability, so decent. Moses Malone's right here as well. Just a bang average, pretty good card. You can get him for relatively cheap, so. Dikembe, he probably deserves to be right next to Mark Eaton. He moves pretty well, though. I might move him up to C tier just because, and his badge count is low too. So if you guys are a fan of Dikembe, I'm sorry. It's just like with what he does as a card, it's kind of hard to put him above Mark Eaton and like Tyson Chandler and stuff. They're all relatively similar. So Jordan Mirasan's D tier as well. He's just really tall. That's literally the only thing he's got going for him. Dino Raja. I love Dino Raja, and he's one of my favorite cards in this game, but I can't sit here and tell you that. I don't know, man. He might be low end B tier. I'm going to keep him here for now. He may move up to low end B tier, though, just because he's so ridiculously annoying as a card. And just honestly, those arms, man. Like, he grabs so many rebounds because he has the longest wingspan in this game. And you can badge him up a little bit. He can shoot the mid. It's hard to really say he's not better than some of these guys. I think he's better than literally every one of these guys in C tier, so I got to put him in B tier. It's just how it is. Rafe LaFrance. I like Rafe LaFrance, but I think he works better as a power forward. So I think that he has to kind of go in C tier. He's just not as good, which sounds messed up completely, to be honest with you to say this, but he is not as good defensively as Bargnani, and Bargnani shoots better. He's got a better jump shot too, as well. They're practically the same card, but Bargnani's significantly better in a few different aspects, which is why he's in B tier, and Rafe is top C tier, in my opinion anyway. Like, could be wrong, but Antonio Davis, he's a little bit small. He just doesn't bring a whole lot to the team. He's not terrible, though. Like, if you've played with an Antonio Davis card before, like, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. He's got decent finishing badges. He's not really the best shooter, but he can shoot the mid-range if he's wide open. He just lacks some defensive badges, and just the ball handle is atrocious for finishing. And when you're playing current gen, finishing off the catch is not as easy as it has been in previous 2Ks. So you kind of need him to have a little bit of dribbling ability, and Antonio Davis just doesn't have that. So Ilgauskas, he can shoot a little bit. He's giant. He's just so slow, and he gets the ball ripped from him anytime he touches it. So Greg Oden's solid. He's just kind of there. Like, C tier is going to encompass a lot of different gem levels and things like that, and a lot of different type of cards. But if you remember how I laid out C tier at the beginning of the video, it makes sense for all these guys to be here. Hakeem Olajuwon is top tier C tier. I just don't think he's as good as these guys in B tier, to be honest with you, but he's still really good. He's just not worth that 50K price tag. Fully badged out Wiseman should be right here too. I mean, he's good. I just don't think he's up on the level of some of these B tier guys, in my opinion. It's kind of tough with Wiseman, just because there's different ways to level him up. You could go with defense. Defense brings him up a little bit. He just doesn't get the offensive stuff necessary to really move up, in my opinion. That's just me, though. JaVale, he deserves to be right here next to, like, Dikembe, Mark Eaton, Andre Drummond, Tyson Chandler. Like, all these guys kind of deserve to be, like, right next to each other. We got the offensive bigs, the defensive bigs, that they all kind of deserve to be right there. What do we got here? Joe Barry Carroll. Joe Barry Carroll is actually not that bad, but he's right here in D tier, to be honest with you. Joel Embiid is still C tier. I know he's a current card, but just he does about 2 or 3 things really well. He shoots the ball really well. He grabs rebounds pretty decent. He can handle the ball a little bit, and he's got good speed. That's pretty much C tier. I don't know how else to really explain that. Karl Anthony Towns is B tier for sure. I think he's better than Kristaps. Kristaps is like low end B tier at this point. Because I'm taking Bargnani over Kristaps. For my offense, I'm probably taking him over like these 3 guys. But it's just depends on the team I'm running. So he's low end B tier, but Karl Anthony Towns is really good. His jump shot is pretty easy to time. He plays decent defense, and he's fast. He is the epitome of B tier at this stage in the game. Kevin Duckworth is not good. Like I said, there's not very many F tier centers, but Kevin Duckworth is one of them. LaMarcus Aldridge is B tier. Granted, he works better as a power forward. I think he's better than Kristaps. I use LaMarcus over Kristaps all day. I like LaMarcus Aldridge a lot. Plus, he's got that LaMarcus Aldridge base, one of the easiest to time jump shots in the entire game. LaMarcus is incredible. I hope everybody got him for playing unlimited last season. Al Horford, Al Horford's actually B tier as well, in my opinion. I think he's better than a lot of the guys in C tier, all of them, to be honest with you. You could argue Hakeem is better for your individual playstyle, and I totally agree. I could agree. But he's basically a better version of Larry Sanders. He moves really well. He even can shoot a little bit from outside. He plays great defense. He's just a little outdated in the badge front, so you're going to have to upgrade some of his badges, but he's a good card. Pau Gasol C tier. I don't think he's as bad as some people think he is. He rebounds the ball really well, and he can shoot decent. He's just a little bit slow. If you played with Pau, you've played with Pau 1,000 times. Like, he always operates the same, so it's just kind of one of those things you have to factor in. Ralph Sampson. Ralph Sampson's tough, man. He might be A tier. Yeah, I think he is, dude. I think Ralph Sampson's A tier. I'm not, like, the biggest fan of some of the post-scoring guys, like a Ralph Sampson. He does have those little T-Rex arms, so his arms are actually pretty small, which is kind of a bummer. He's 7'4" with a 7'2" wingspan, so he's got a big upper body, small arms. But at the same time, he's an elite card as far as defensively. His speed with ball is not great. His speed's not terribly great, but he's 7'4" and he moves really well. Like, don't get his 44 speed twisted. Like, he covers ground on the floor. He's not fast by any means, but he's not as slow as some of the other guys. Like, he's not Mark Eaton slow or like Ilgauskas slow. Like, he's really not, and he can shoot the 3-ball and shoot the mid a little bit. You can upgrade some of his shooting badges as well, like Hot Zone Hunter. He's got okay mid-range hot zones, none out in the 3-point lane. Comes standard with a bunch of defensive badges. You can give him some playmaking badges like Break Starter and like Lob City Passer and Lob City Finisher and stuff. So, Bailout. He's not terrible at all. It's tough though. I think he's probably right next to Lanier. Yeah, I would say he's B tier at this stage. Like, I don't think he's as good as Robinson, Russell, or Ewing, personally. You could argue that he's A tier. I mean, obviously you cannot argue he's S tier, but A tier you could argue. Rick Smits, C tier. I like Rick Smits, but I'm not crazy. He's C tier at this stage in the game. Like, Ronnie Cycli. I hate Ronnie Cycli. Like, I hate this card so much. Doing those challenges last season was the most grueling thing I did all season long. But I'm unbiased. Ronnie Cycli is a D tier card. He can shoot a little bit. He moves actually pretty decent. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's awful. To be honest, I would probably use him over Alvin Adams. I'd probably use him over Vlade Divac. Yeah, Mirasan. I would use him over Mirasan for sure. I hate Mirasan. Roy Hibbert. Roy Hibbert's got a little mid-range jump shot. That's all you need to keep you out of F tier. Like, literally. Ryan Hollins, he's actually pretty decent. He plays really good defense, and he dunks the ball, and he's really, like, strong. He has really high strength, so he bullies people down low. Shaq. I like Shaquille O'Neal. Don't get me wrong. Like, I have the other Shaq up in C tier, and to be honest with you, the starter Shaq would also be in C tier, especially if he's all the way badged out. But this Shaq is like, coming down on his luck Shaq. He's like bigger, he's slow, his badges aren't really good. There's just better centers, to be completely honest with you. He doesn't even play defense well enough to really like put him over some of these guys. So Vin Baker's decent, but he's really, really small, and he's just not incredibly great at anything. He doesn't really play good defense or rebound the ball very well, but he can shoot decent and run the rim. But I'm probably taking most of these guys over him. Like, I think Antonio Davis is a better version of Vin Baker. Arvydas Sabonis, I think, is legitimately A tier. And he's the final card. The reason I saved him was because I just wasn't sure where to put him. But I think after looking at this list, he's A tier, especially with that dynamic duo with Isaiah Ryder. He's an A tier center, man. He's 7'3", but he's got decent speed. That's like a 60 speed, which doesn't sound very good, but think about that on a 7'3" man running down the court. It works. He's huge. He plays well on the inside. He dunks the ball. He shoots really well. There's not really much this Arvydas Sabonis card doesn't do. The only thing that's keeping him out of S tier is just that he can't dribble the ball, and he is that little bit slow. His passing is not great either. So there are negatives, but at the same time, for like 40K, which is what he's going for, I don't think there's really too many better center options aside like Bill Russell, who's free. Or like Buck Williams, who's free, who's technically a power forward. So anyways, guys, that's the tier list. Thanks for watching my videos. Thanks for watching all the tier list videos. If you're one of those people who watched all 5, I appreciate all you guys. Check out the description for all my stuff, man. Other than that, I'll be back with new videos literally every day. I put up daily NBA 2K21 My Team content. So subscribe if that's something that interests you. Drop a like on this video, man. Comment down below who you think should have been lower, who you think should have been higher. If you disagree with any of my stuff, let me know in the comments. I literally always will answer back if they're respectful in most ways. So check that out. Like I said, hit the description, my Patreon, my Twitch, everything's on there. I do have a capture card coming, so I will be streaming a lot more once that gets here. So make sure to go follow the Twitch, turn the noties on, etc. So definitely check that out, and I'll be back with some more videos tonight. Definitely a bunch more videos tomorrow when we get content. So peace out, you guys.